It's Scotland's largest food export, and with Shetland supplying up to a third of the national output, salmon farms employ around 400 people here, while also supporting a range of other jobs in the wider local economy. But Holyrood's Environment Committee today published a report warning that our marine ecosystem faces irrecoverable damage if the industry is allowed to expand in its current form. The cross-party group of MSPs raised particular concerns about high mortality rates, sea lice, and the potential negative impacts on wild fish stocks. Their report claims that the industry is poorly regulated and that there's only been minimal improvements on issues that were raised as far back as the year 2002. Well, I put these concerns to Davy Sandison, who is the General Manager of the Scottish Salmon Producers Organisation.
I am disappointed in that analysis. I think it's quite safe to say there's been a significant amount of progress since 2002.
What examples can you give of where you've made progress?
In coordinating our management arrangements so that we have synchronous production in management areas. It's chalk and cheese compared to what it was in 2002.
But if you look at the mortality rates, sea lice and diseases, it doesn't look like there's been a lot of progress there.
As far as mortality goes, we have to say we've had a dreadful couple of years, so looking at mortality information at the moment, it's not a pretty picture, and our industry's got to do significantly better to drive down the mortality levels, and mortality is something that it moves year by year, and we hope we've got measures in place to try to make sure we're on top of that. On sea lice, the sea lice numbers are the lowest they've been since formal records began 6 years ago after the introduction of the Aquaculture and Fisheries Act. So the sea lice story is actually slightly different, and we still have a massive challenge with sea lice, but we are getting on top of that.
On the mortality rates, they've increased to upwards of 20% from 2014. So if there were, say, 168,000 tonnes of salmon produced last year, that's potentially tens of millions of fish, or 1 in 4. What do you think the public would say if that was cattle or chicken?
There don't seem to be specifically comparable figures for other livestock production sectors, so it'd be interesting to see if that analysis could be done. What I would say is that figure that you've quoted there is not the figure that the industry recognises. Last year we had a very high mortality rate, and we think it's more like about 14%. That's still unacceptable, however, we would like to drive that down, and we continue to do so.
So can you explain why Marine Scotland, who should be impartial and accurate, has the wrong information?
I would like to know more about where that figure comes from. That's not the way that we calculate those numbers, and we would need to look at that to understand why we've got a different figure.
So what are you doing to get them to change the figure? You must be quite cross that they're using inaccurate figures and painting a negative picture unnecessarily.
No, I don't think that's the case at all. We can't really win out of this one. Mortality numbers are not good, whichever way you look at them, and we're not interested in arguing over the numbers. We want to make sure we're dealing with the challenge.
Locally, this is a huge employer in Shetland, and nationally it's a top food export. So how concerned are you that the questionable environmental record is jeopardising current and future jobs in this community and beyond?
I'm very concerned, and clearly the industry is going to stand up to all its challenges. We certainly want to protect the interest and the livelihood of all people in the communities in which we operate. We're very concerned about environmental impact, and we'll do everything we can to make sure that we're in line with what's expected from an environmental point of view.
Now, you told the Parliament in February that you would begin to publish data on diseases, mortalities and lice. When's that going to start?
The first reports will be out in April this year. That will be the January 2018 figures for sea lice and mortality levels on all farms in Scotland.
And in light of the Environment Committee saying that at this stage any expansion wouldn't be sustainable, would you object to a short-term moratorium on expansion?
I'm not really aware that that's part of what's been spoken about here, and I think at the moment we're just concentrating on dealing with the challenges that we've got. If we have to speak to regulators about the future and regulatory requirements, then we'll do so. We want to have a constructive look at all the issues and make sure we can move forward.
But would you reject a ban on expansion until the environmental record is improved? That's what campaign groups are saying. The committee says potentially that there shouldn't be expansion until these issues are resolved. Would you object to a ban?
I think at the moment the industry will not be making any moves forward until it's overcome its challenges. The industry itself is quite capable of making decisions about whether it's in a position to expand. Investment in Scotland will depend on performance. If we're not performing well enough, then that investment could be in jeopardy.
So would you oppose a ban then if that's going to be the next stage as a result of the findings?
I don't think we're at that stage yet, and I'm not prepared to get into that kind of discussion at this moment.
You're listening to BBC Radio Shetland. The time has just come up to 13 minutes to 6. Still to come in the programme, we'll hear about the new